Washington Journal continues.
Billie Vincent, the former director of the Office of Aviation Safety for the FAA and currently the president and CEO of Aerospace Services International. Congressman Don Young and Congressman John Mica, according to USA Today, are going to be introducing a bill today to let Congress decide whether pilots should be allowed to carry guns aboard commercial flights. Should they?
Absolutely. It's a controversial issue, but only with some people. The vast majority of the people, I think, that have weighed in on the issue favor pilots having guns.
Why?
Because it's the last layer of what ought to be a multi-layered, interdependent security system. You can't count on any one single layer being 100% effective. So you have these layers, and the last one has to be in the airplane. Unfortunately, right now, the Bush administration has the last layer in a fighter over this city. And that fighter pilot, in many cases, is a commercial airline pilot.
Explain what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, commercial airline pilots, 60% of them were former military. Many of them are still doing reserve duty, Air National Guard duty, and so on. And we have the bizarre situation where a pilot can't be allowed to have a gun, and the Bush administration has weighed in on that very heavily. Yet that same pilot that we won't permit to have a gun is sitting in a fighter airplane sometimes, ready to shoot one of his colleagues down, and a whole airplane full of innocent passengers. That's totally bizarre.
Why, Secretary Mineta is expected to make an announcement later this week. Why isn't a stun gun enough?
Because, number one, stun guns fail on several accounts. First and foremost, stun guns don't always work. And in a CNN this week, that was demonstrated, where policemen were shot with stun guns and they kept coming. Now, even if stun guns did work, you had 5 hijackers on 3 of those flights, 4 on another. Visualize, if you would, one pilot standing in the door with a stun gun, whether it's a taser or whether it's an arm-length stun gun. One-shot weapon. He's dead with the second hijacker. Besides, you can't count on the hijackers having knives next time. They may have guns. So that last layer, a pilot with a gun, is necessary. But I don't simply want to see us hand him a gun or her a gun. We have to set up a pilot air marshal program.
What's that?
Well, that's simply you give the pilots the authority, the legal authority, to take lethal action. You hold the airlines harmless, but you set up a system under the federal air marshals where you set up a professional, trained force of pilots with guns, standard air marshal weapons, standard air marshal ammunition. You put closed-circuit television in all areas of the passenger cabins, with the exception of toilets, of course, so that the pilots in the flight deck know what's going on
without
without
like
having...
what JetBlue is doing now?
Yes, but all of the passenger cabin. But you don't stop there. You put ballistics material on the inside of the bulkhead walls in the cockpit, as well as that strengthened cockpit door. Now, a lot of people say, well, we're going to strengthen the cockpit door. No big problem. Man, from his entire history, has been building barriers, right? Every last one of them have been penetrated. We need that pilot air marshal program, well-trained, well-provisioned, supervised by the Federal Air Marshal Program, which is incapable of doing the job, by the way, just by sheer numbers. So we need to do that. We need to do it quickly, because our adversaries may be planning the next, and probably are, the next attack right now.
The Congress is going to be holding a hearing on this issue Thursday, I think it is.
Yes.
Yeah, and so we will be able to hear more about this then. But Billie Vincent is with us today, and he's going to take your questions and comments, and those the phone numbers you see on the bottom of your screen. We'll start taking your calls right away, because I'm sure people have a lot of feelings about this. What have you done in the past to bring you to this just to this point of view so strongly?
Well, as head of security in the FAA for several years, I had worldwide responsibility for aviation security. And one of those things was the Federal Air Marshal Program. They reported directly to me. I signed their missions, their requirements, and so on. And I'm very familiar with the Air Marshal Program. And we have something like 30,000 flights a day in our system. With 30,000 flights a day, we would put an average of 3 air marshals on each flight. That's 90,000 air marshals for a 5-day week. When you go to a 7-day week, you're 127,000. Each 10,000 air marshals is going to cost you a minimum of $1 billion a year. Doesn't count the revenue seats that they take away from the airlines. It doesn't count some of the other expenses. It's an economic and a practical impossibility to protect ourselves by federal air marshals. They're a good force. We need to keep them, but let's use them wisely. Let's put them in charge of a pilot air marshal program. That way we are assured of having guns, and I don't mean for the pilots to come out of the cockpit and do battle in the passenger cabin. They're there to protect the integrity of the cockpit and get that airplane on the ground. That's what we need.
Fort Campbell, Kentucky, you're first up. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. I'm a pilot for American Airlines, and I've got a comment and a quick question. As it is now, pilots aren't allowed to even carry simple things like toenail clippers and things like that on the plane. How would you propose changing the mindset of going from something as strenuously checked as toenail clippers to allowing them to carry guns? That entire mindset change would be revolutionary in the industry. And the second question I have, which is a legitimate concern from the airlines part, how would you propose paying for all of the changes that would have to be made, not just structurally, but logistically to the industry to allow this type of thing to happen? Thanks.
Well, first, the payment for the changes would be far less expensive than the expansion of the Federal Air Marshal Program that we currently have underway. So the U.S. government ought to pay for that, including the ballistic protection inside the cockpit on the bulkhead walls and the door, and also the closed-circuit televisions. We have to create a system, and it ought to be the federal government that pays for that. As far as changing the mindset, that's most difficult, and the most difficult thing is that we have a president who is dead set against guns in cockpits. But he's getting very bad advice. And what we don't know is whether Tom Ridge, the Director of Homeland Security, or Norman Mineta, the Secretary of Transportation, is voicing their own opinion on this in opposing guns in the cockpit, or whether they are supporting the president. We simply have to get that changed. I think the attitude has already changed by the general public. I believe they, best I can tell, the vast majority support the pilots having guns.
Salem, New Hampshire, Republican. Good morning.
Good morning. I have my comments here. I think it's rather ludicrous that they would ban guns in the cockpit when the pilot is in control of an aircraft that's worth I don't know how many millions of dollars and probably several hundred passengers at the same time. Now, if he wanted to do harm to anyone, all he had to do was just take a nosedive. And I don't see why pilots can't carry handguns. It's, I don't know, it seems to be the last, like the gentleman said, it's the last resort. And whoever's trying to hijack the plane is not going to be armed with a gun, most likely. And a handgun, I think, would do the trick.
Well, yes, the handgun would do the trick. In a, excuse me, in a stun gun situation, you have a one-shot or at best a two-shot chance.
Is that because that's the way those guns are manufactured?
That's the way they're made, and it's difficult to change them to a multiple shot. There is